With three key races on the line, Dems are relying heavily on people of color to save the day again. Black voters overwhelmingly and reliably support Democratic candidates, but year after year after year, black leaders say Democratic politicians court their vote, promise systemic change, and then fail to follow through. And since Democrats have failed to pass voting rights reform, activists say the consequences could be felt at the polls today with a ripple effect that will last for years to come.
Nobody knows the situation better than our next guest, the founder of Black Male Voter Project, Mondale Robinson. Good to have you back today, Mondale, on Election Day. So, are you going to make any predictions about tonight?
I predict that in Atlanta, we're going to have a runoff. In New Jersey, Democratic incumbent will be reelected the first time since 1977. And in Virginia, I think Democrats are going to praise all the voters in Alexandria and Fairfax County who are floating to the polls. I mean, by noon, we had already seen 41,000 people vote in Alexandria County. So I think there's going to be some long nights, maybe in Virginia, but I think the Democrats will put it out as well.
So Mondale, let's talk about what we see year after year when Democrats are courting black voters. I'm reminded of what Al Sharpton once said when he was running for president. You invite us to the party, but then you don't want to dance. And we see this time and time again. Should Democrats be excited about the fact that the New Jersey governor, Phil Murphy, has a chance of winning re-election, but then should they have some anxiety about what they're seeing happening in the Old Dominion state of Virginia, where it was almost like a last-ditch effort, like, oh, we better reach out and get the black vote?
I think this is an extremely important issue, and we see this election cycle after election cycle where Democrats pick and choose which elections they're going to highlight. The results from New Jersey should not be considered where the Democrats or how Democrats are doing with their base voters. What happens in New Jersey is a little different because, like I said, they have an incumbent who is extremely popular all through the summer when other Democrats' ratings were crashing. Phil Murphy was still at 57% approval rating, so and way higher amongst his base. So you have a popular incumbent governor that's going to win election that has a double-digit lead. Democrats should not take that as how voters feel about them and what the job they've been doing in Washington, D.C. since the election. Furthermore, I think it's extremely important that we take Virginia and dissect which voters are turning out, which voters stayed at home, and the Democrats should pay attention to that because what they're going to find is in early voting, especially, they only increase in voters were with especially black voters were black voters over 65. That means young voters and young black voters more specifically stayed at home, and that's dangerous. It's not how we're going to win the midterm.
Mondale, when you look at what's happening in Virginia, a 10-point lead for that state coming out of the presidential election, and now a squeaker between the Democrat and Republican. Does that, if Terry McAuliffe pulls through and wins, is that a victory for Terry McAuliffe, or is that a victory of black voters?
I think it's a combination of things. I don't think the Democrats should be happy with that victory. First of all, we know it's extremely low participation in off-year election cycles. Secondly, we know that the Democrats are winning by luck. I mean, and by luck, I mean they're not responsible for the victory that they're going to win. They're going to have this evening, and part of that is because of their lack of action in Washington D.C. But it's also the lack of action on McCullough and his campaign's part, the Democratic Party in Virginia's part, for not reaching out to black voters, especially those that they consider sporadic or low information, and instead prioritizing conservative-leaning white voters. So I think that strategy continues to fail Democrats. That population, talking about conservative-leaning white voters, have not voted for Democrats since they allowed black people to sit in 1960s when Fannie Lou Hamer was sick and tired of being sick and tired. Unfortunately, the Democratic Party is not sick and tired of chasing these voters. And what happens is we have low turnout, low excitement on our base, and it's a dangerous game to play. So I think, McCullough will win by razor thin margins, and the Democrats will consider that they've done something right. And when in actuality, they've just got lucky once again because of black and brown voters.
Let's look at the historical nature of what's happening in Virginia. There's a lot more races we want to focus on, but in Virginia tonight, the history will be made in the Commonwealth because it will elect its first woman, and by the way, a woman of color to the position of lieutenant governor, the second highest office in the Commonwealth. Now, it could be the Democrat Hala Ayala, or it could be the Republican Winsome Sears. To those ends of the spectrum, it shows that women of color can appeal to both parties, does it not?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is we're putting in Virginia, this race is putting on display that one, representation by demographic is not enough, and also that women, you're absolutely right, can hold their own, are holding their own. And Haya Ayala, we know, is an extremely progressive, wonderful candidate that did a wonderful job becoming one of the, I think, the first Iranian elected woman in the state. So I'm super excited about what happens, and also that seat, which was formerly held by Fairfax, or currently right now is held by Lieutenant Governor Fairfax, who's a black man who we thought was gonna be the next black governor of Virginia, till something happened, some things happened, and that didn't happen. So I'm super excited about this projection of Hyla Ayala's career, and I do think she's gonna win. This might be a case where we see a lieutenant governor outperform a gubernatorial candidate, in her out doing better than her Democrat counterpart.
What lessons are you looking to draw from this heading into 2022 midterms, right? That's what the congressional, the balance of Congress at stake, and then, of course, the next presidential election in 2024.
I think the lessons for the Democrats, we've been screaming, people that see the world like I see the world, that the base is black voters majority, percentage wise, and then progressive young voters, and then other people of color. And I think the lesson for Democrats is you can no longer run races like baby boomers are the largest voting bloc. That is no longer going to work. It didn't win you the election last in 2020. It didn't win you the election in 2018. It's not going to win in 2022. The demographics of this country is darkening and also becoming more younger, and these voters are not party loyalists. So the idea that you think James Clyburn, Barack Obama, or any other Democrat that white Democrats fawn over will be enough is a failed strategy. And if you're not talking about issues that you've learned from these demographics, then you're wasting your time and you're playing a dangerous game where you may give control of your houses, meaning the Senate and the House, back to the Republicans in the midterm.
There are other races, as you know, Mondale, taking place throughout the country, most notably mayoral races. But look, the bottom line tomorrow, what do you think the world will be saying, or the United States will be saying about the power of black voters, and what will black voters be saying to Democrats and Republicans alike?
Uh, Black voters are going to say to Democrats, especially black men, you're running thin on air. You're running real thin on air as you pretend you care about our issues during election cycles and disappear during your campaign or your presidency or your gubernatorial, your governor's run or your mayor's run. So here's what I tell the Democrats. You don't have to live this life where you're playing politics in the last few days of an election cycle. You can engage black and brown voters throughout the year and hear from them, and stop listening to your white consultants as if they know what's going on and what's ailing our communities. And you can show up as better people and not in transactional nature, which will in turn out the voters in a higher propensity, and also probably get a higher approval rating for your candidates.
All right, Mondale Robinson, founder of Black Male Voter Project. We thank you for joining us this hour.